Human activity is driving climate change, but many of us don't know exactly what we personally can do to minimize our negative impact on the planet. In fact, we can do a lot, such as reducing our individual carbon footprint and reusing resources. We can also learn from others who are setting a good example. I will be meeting some of them on this week's show. I am Chris Alems in Lagos, Nigeria. Good to have you with us. Here's what's coming up. Turning plastic waste into children's toys. Converting vacant offices to solve the global housing crisis. And how a Ugandan radio manager has walked 1,000 kilometers for cleaner cities. But our first report takes us to northern Ghana, where the period between early July and late August is the lynch season. It's a time when food stocks run low and many face hunger. Food insecurity is only worsened by the kind of severe drought that the region is currently grappling with. What farmers need are resilient crops, and if they have high nutritional value too, that's even better.
Thankfully, there are still a few cobs of millet left. It is all Dut Muilibit Lambong has to feed her grandchildren and herself. Many families in Jimbale, northern Ghana, are in the same position. They mainly grow maize or rice. The next harvest is still a few weeks away and supplies are running low. Then there is the prolonged drought. Many peanut plants have withered, some of the maize too, where rice is not maturing. At the largest hospital in the region, the Baptist Medical Center in Alergu, many patients are malnourished. Asia Sumaila is expecting a baby. And, like half of the pregnant women here, she is suffering from anemia. Her blood has too few red blood cells because she doesn't have enough to eat.
When a new day breaks, if I am lucky, I eat 3 times. At worst, only once.
Pregnant women with anemia lack important nutrients, so they often give birth to malnourished children. 2-year-old Bismarck's health has worsened over the past 5 months. He's lost more weight and is always tired. He's just one of the 13 children being treated here for acute malnutrition.
Bismarck is marasmic, and the middle upper arm circumference is 9.2, which shows that he's actually severely malnourished.
Lambon Maturga and his family are doing all they can to produce more food, while other farmers are still hoping their maize will survive the drought. His family is already harvesting. That's because they planted pearl millet. It's sown earlier than maize and is more resistant to drought. Farming this crop is good. It will help any household around this time of the year. Those who refused to grow millet are now regretting that decision. I always depend on it every year, and it never fails me.
The
Ghanaian government has long promoted the cultivation of maize and rice at the expense of millet. This is because the yields per hectare are significantly higher for maize, for example. The country only produces around 200,000 tons of millet annually and more than 15 times as much maize. As recommended by the government, farmer Mohammed Adam Yahaya grows rice and maize. But he is worried that his yields will suffer due to the drought. He's also tried millet, but because his fields are in constant use, the soil is too depleted for millet.
Here, we have practiced those ones and we seem that it's not suitable here. So you can only do maize. Even some of the millet we do, but it's not all that okay for us. Because the fertility is not more like it used to be. So we are not much particular on the rice, the maize, and some of the yam.
New varieties of pearl millet could solve the problem. They are being propagated here in the test fields at the Savannah Agricultural Research Institute in northern Ghana. varieties that can thrive despite depleted soils and that are even better adapted to drought.
When you get little rain but it's well distributed, it will be able to do well. Where maize will not stand, millet will stand. It requires very little quantities of inputs in terms of fertilizer. You don't spray millet fields with anything.
These new varieties can be stored at a cold room at the Institute. Right now, it's almost empty because the new millet is being analyzed in the lab. Other samples have already been sent to some 5,000 farmers across northern Ghana for trial. The feedback has mostly been good. Meanwhile, Lambon Maturka and his family have almost completed the millet harvest. They are still using a traditional variety of pearl millet, and yet they've harvested 600 kilos in 2 weeks without the use of chemicals. More than enough to bridge this short lean season where there is no maize. The family can even sell the millet and, in the meantime, focus on maize, which will need chemical fertilizers. We finished harvesting the millet and I've just planted some maize on the same field. In 2 weeks' time, I will apply fertilizer. The plants are already looking good. In nearby Jimbale, Moibir Ama and other street food bakers now have enough millet to cook traditional deep-fried balls made from millet, water and little sugar. It is a popular dish and affordable at around 5 per ball. They are rich in nutrients like iron and magnesium, and that's not all. Millet is a healthy meal. It is organic, no one sprays chemicals on it, so it's good for our health. Pearl millet may still be the underdog among Ghana's crops, but it has the potential to really improve the country's food security and stand up to the challenges of a changing climate.
Next, we move to South Africa for this week's Doing Your Bit. It's pretty amazing how much can be made from recycled plastic bottles such as bricks, clothes and furniture, all sorts of things. In Cape Town, we found a company that is turning them into very cute children's toys. It's a great example of how circular economy works.
The little boy in my driver's seat is Mukundi Makono. He's 5 years old and quite the stuntman. As you can see, I'm a toy scooter. What you can't see is what I used to be. I was once plastic bottles and milk containers like these. Waste that was destined for landfill or the open sea. South Africa produces nearly 2.5 million tonnes of plastic waste each year. Around 1/7 of it is recycled. Here at recycling firm Tas Plastics in Cape Town, the waste is shredded and formed into the elements I'm made of. And a warning, it's about to get complicated.
We will put it through our process of granulating it into small granules. Then it gets washed, it gets dried, it gets heated up, it gets shipped into a extruder hopper, it gets extruded, it gets pelletized, all depending on the system it's put through.
Phew, that was a lot. Time for a short break to play. A 180-degree turn is one of Mukundi's top tricks. Yay! In the meantime, the pellets still have to be melted down. Then this cool mould shapes my individual parts. The manufacturer used to import toys from China, but it was too expensive. So the company started making their own scooters from recycled plastic and using solar power too to save money.
What made me use recycled material was cost. Originally it was just purely based on cost. How do we make our product as cost effective as possible for the market to accept our product?
The repurposed waste is half the price of new plastic. My colourful wheels do need fresh plastic. They wouldn't look so bright otherwise. But apparently, I'm at least 90% recycled. And I'm proud to say I can be purchased at Africa's largest supermarket chain. I cost between $9 and $20, depending on the model. Incidentally, my design is based on the scooters that deliver groceries in many South African cities. Mukundi hasn't been bored since we've been playing together these past 3 years. And Dad's happy too.
He loves it so much, he's always riding around. I think it's the experience of his first car, truly driving a car. So he loves it a lot.
To a completely different topic now, empty buildings. These days, many office buildings around the world have high vacancy rates. This is partly due to the number of people working from home since the global COVID pandemic. And at the same time, there's a housing crisis in cities everywhere because of rising rents. One solution could be to convert those unused offices into homes.
If you live in a city, there's a pretty good chance you're living through a housing crisis. Rents in major cities are skyrocketing. And this is happening all around the world. At the same time housing has grown scarce, some buildings stand empty. Downtown Frankfurt looks like just about any other big city's central business district. But the gleaming high-rises do hide an alarming fact. Nearly 10% of the city's offices are vacant. Other major cities around the globe have vacancy rates that high or even higher. So why don't we just convert empty offices into housing for people worldwide? While many of us are back in the office, working from home is here to stay. For instance, 35% of US workers who can work from home still do, and plenty only come into the office on occasion. But vacant workspaces aren't a new problem. Long before the pandemic, aging offices were already becoming less desirable.
Because there'd been, for about the last 10 years, a trend that we called flight to quality.
Stephen Painter, an architect at one of the world's biggest firms, focuses on adaptive reuse.
People weren't renewing their leases in older buildings, they were going to the new ones that were being built because they offered the kind of amenities, the kind of locations people wanted.
All these empty offices aren't just a waste of space, they mean less rent for owners, lower tax revenue for cities, and the decline of entire neighborhoods.
We have beautiful buildings, we have the wonderful plazas, we have sort of all of the physical assets. We just have vacant buildings. And so you don't see that vibrancy. You used to, kind of look down these key corridors and you would see just streams of people, coming down the street, and you don't see that as much anymore.
Lily Langley is a planner in San Francisco, another city addressing high vacancies.
Almost 95% of our tax revenue comes from business tax from downtown. About 80% of our GDP came from downtown companies in 2021. It is our economic engine, and so it needs to thrive so the city can thrive.
Roughly 1/3 of offices are vacant in San Francisco, the third most expensive housing market in the US. At the same time, the ongoing construction of new housing is causing a whole different host of problems.
In order to meet climate targets, but also other sustainability targets, we will need to actually stick with what's already built.
Pernilla Hagberg researches urban sustainability at Stockholm's Royal Institute of Technology.
Even if this new production of housing and buildings is done with very energy efficient and optimized technologies, this won't be enough. We will also need to reduce the total amount of new production.
And this is what brings us to Frankfurt. I checked out an ongoing conversion project. An office tower built in the 90s will soon be reborn as around 150 furnished apartments. Benjamin Albrecht, the developer's regional European head, is excited about adaptive reuse.
The environmental factor is obvious since the building's shell is already standing. The shell alone usually accounts for about 50% of emissions during construction, a fairly significant portion.
But it doesn't only save on emissions. revamping an office building can be up to 30% cheaper, and construction can be done in half the time. Though that depends on the project. This one wasn't much cheaper than a new build, but speed played a big part.
I think the time factor is really critical. It allows us to start generating rental income from the property pretty quickly.
Repurposing an old building to serve a new function is called adaptive reuse and can extend a structure's life. Think of turning old factories into artist lofts or warehouses into ubiquitous street food halls. Retrofitting an existing structure is a lot more complicated than planning everything from scratch. As developers have found out, apartments and offices aren't always a one-to-one fit. It depends on when and where they were built. Modern, open-plan offices weren't built for living in. First, you must divide up large areas while ensuring rooms get enough sunlight. And you can't just have one big bathroom for a whole floor. Each room needs ventilation, heating, and power too. To end up with shiny new apartments, many conversions essentially rebuild everything except existing foundations and facades. These constraints make many offices just too much work to convert. According to Painter's research, roughly 30% of offices are ideal candidates.
If you look at the US market where we're doing a lot of this work, there's about 100 billion square feet of office space. And if you converted just the vacancy, or about 7% of that, you could create between 6 and 7 million new homes.
But just turning offices into apartments isn't going to be enough. Neighborhoods that are just office blocks can be a bit inhospitable. Crawling with finance bros by day, morphing into ghost towns outside of business hours. Ensuring people live, not just work there, could change that. This neighborhood of Frankfurt Niederrad was developed as a sprawling set of offices in the 60s and 70s, given the wildly creative nickname of the Bürostadt, or office city. But by the mid-2000s, nearly 1 in 3 of the offices were sitting empty. In 2006, the city began converting the empty office towers into housing, creating true mixed-use development. Now it's filled with places to live, shop, eat, and go to school, instead of just places to work. Frankfurt rezoned the area and turned parking lots into green spaces and kindergartens. It brought in developers to build apartments and shops. When they're done, there'll be 6,000 apartments here.
Now that the area is livelier, offices have actually become more attractive, so it's easier to rent them out.
The Canadian city of Calgary started working with Painter to revitalize its downtown in 2021.
Calgary had about 38% vacancy in their office market. And that was, at the time, one of the worst in the world. They very quickly actually put a program together which gives you $75 a square foot to convert the building, and moved all of the red tape out of the way to make these projects move more quickly. The first 5 projects are now under construction. It represents about 750 new homes. And they have 10 more approved.
Painter says much of this housing will be affordable and built with families in mind, thanks to the financial incentives provided by the city. Adaptive reuse often has even more red tape than new builds that will have to change if we're going to use this potential to curb emissions.
So if you take Toronto, where I am, as an example, there's a rule in all of downtown that you cannot remove office space. It's protected as employment lands. That was created in the 70s, and it just never got updated because there was no need to change it. Well, now there's a desperate need to change it, and it's kind of holding up these projects happening.
Such arbitrary regulations are quite common, and approval for conversions often takes as long as it would for a new build, even though the structure is already in place. Since their first office conversion projects have gone well, Benjamin Albrecht thinks his firm will focus more on adaptive reuse. Many developers have shown interest in these projects, and cities like San Francisco are supporting office conversions. The kind of support offered may determine the type of housing we get. Flipping offices into housing is clearly no quick fix, and it's not going to solve the global housing crisis overnight. But Frankfurt and Calgary do show it can make cities vastly more livable, and it can drastically reduce the environmental impact of relying solely on new builds.
The activist in our next report is a radio manager in Kampala, Uganda. But Joseph Beyanga is best known for his commitment to improving street safety, especially for children. He knows that starts with changing attitudes and behaviors and getting away from the idea that driving is better than walking.
Africa's cities are getting more and more crowded. By 2050, the number of city dwellers is set to almost triple to 1.3 billion. And the city traffic chaos is growing along with them. Cars, buses and trucks are gridlocked everywhere, pumping out exhaust fumes. Lagos, Cairo, Accra and Johannesburg are among the most polluted African cities. The death rate due to air pollution in Africa is twice as high as the global average. Many cities on the continent are having trouble finding a solution. In Uganda's capital, Kampala, one man, Joseph Beyanga, is tired of it. The traffic in his city has cost many lives. Last year alone, some 1,600 pedestrians died in traffic accidents. In addition, many have died or gotten sick from the polluted air.
We have very many vehicles on the road, most of them not in a good condition. They are putting out fumes which are not good for even the people who are walking. We are living in a city whereby we are killing people every day. We need to rethink, implement, design a city that is safe for all.
The World Health Organization warns that Kampala's air quality is not within safe limits. So this morning, Joe Walker, as he is known on social media, is joining authorities in Kampala to promote non-motorized transport as a way of reducing emissions. The city planners are piloting temporary car-free zones.
So we felt it wise that if we can promote the non-motorized corridors, transport systems, and then we start encouraging it into our people, telling them how the benefits of those non-motorized kind of transportation will become good.
More than half of Kampala's population walks and cycles. This inspired authorities to adopt a framework of non-motorized transport in 2012. But it was not until 9 years later that a pilot car-free zone was commissioned in Kampala. It stretches for close to 2 kilometers. Beyanga says it's not enough for the city's population of more than 3 million.
One of the things I'd love to see in Kampala is right from the entrance of the CBD, just the busiest zone, car-free zone. It should be car-free. If you are going to come into the city, the most you can do is cycle, just like our friends who are just cycling past us. Just cycle into the city. That is very safe for everybody. That is safe for people who are cycling. It's safe for the people who are within the city.
Many Ugandans associate driving with status. Beyanga wants to change the mindset that walking and cycling is only for the poor. He's spreading the message in schools.
An accident, they're called crashes. We have an accident and so many students got injured.
Some institutions like Makerere University have now introduced cleaner mobility to replace motorized transport on campus.
I must be me riding. Just wish how it would be, how it would look if these bikes were in the city. Imagine, oh, Kampala would be beautiful. Kampala would not be choking. Kampala will not be having the dirtiest air.
On and off the road, Beyanga is always campaigning for clean and safe mobility. As a professional broadcaster, he knows how to use the media effectively.
Each one of us has got something to do. Me, what I can do best is awareness. Yes. Raise awareness, point out the issues that need to be done, and let somebody do the intervention.
Beyanga mobilized concerned citizens to embark on a 220-kilometer activism walk to the east of Kampala. The 6-day journey was his second attempt to complete hundreds of kilometers on foot. Participants enjoyed plenty of health benefits in the process.
I thought it was an interesting course to keep me in shape, but also walking helps me for my health. It gives me clarity of mind. But when you walk, you identify with people, what they like, how they behave, what their communities are like, things that you probably never have observed when you're driving.
Joe Walker is convinced that with small strides, he'll take the message far. One step at a time, He hopes to lead Uganda to a safe, brighter and cleaner path.
Well, good luck to him. If you liked that report or something you'd like to share about anything else in the show, then please write to us at eco@dw.com. We'd love to hear what you think. For now, it's goodbye from me, Chris Alems, in Nigeria. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to head to EcoAfrica online for more inspiring stories. See you again next time.